Good morning, good evening, and keep it tight. Welcome back to Liquidmatrix Security Digest Hacker Radio Podcast, episode 0x7C. Hopefully I got that right this time. Here with me this week are myself, Dave Lewis, Matt Johansson back from his European vacation, look kids, Big Ben, Parliament, and James Arlen on the Wheels of Steel. I should point out that this show does not represent the thoughts, intentions, plans, or strategies for world domination of our employers, ex-girlfriends, wives, belly button lint, or the militant wing of the Girl Guides. It is solely our own personal opinions. We make no guarantees to the accuracy, validity, sobriety, relevance, or importance of anything we say or do here. My portion of this podcast has been brought to you by 1Password. No, really. Hey folks, I did it. I actually got through the opening read for the first time ever without stumbling over my own tongue. Okay, that was something else.
Oh no, this is twice now.
I did it once before?
Yeah, in like 12 years.
To Pete. No.
Making me sad, Dave. You're making me very sad. But it does appear that this is a habit now because we're doing it regularly. We have a plan, like an editorial calendar for future episodes.
That's terrifying all by itself.
We're acting like grown-ups. And I think that's the fundamental difference in what's going on. It's all fun and games, and then you're not doing that whole maybe we will, maybe we won't thing. You're behaving. I mean, look, we even got Matt.
We should do the podcast. We should do the podcast. Yeah,
dude, we said that for about 5 years.
I know.
Off and on.
Every time
we did, but then I had a catalytic moment where I realized I had a lot of free time suddenly, and I was like, okay, wait a minute, we should really do this. And then Matt said, we should really do this. What was that?
Someone stole your converter?
No. I was given a complimentary cigarette and blindfold, and I realized I had a lot of free time suddenly. But now I don't have free time anymore. But you're right. It's nice to be adults, and it's nice to do this. And honestly,
you're talking about an alternate revenue stream that you were looking into.
Alternate revenue stream.
Yeah, you Sawzall underneath cars, yanking cats.
Dude, you weren't supposed to say the quiet part loud.
We got lots of news. We got some breaches. We got a actually really interesting cyber thing that relates to the Canadian government. There's a mailbag and a DERP entry briefly, and then we're out. But I think we should kick it off with young Matthew. Hey man, it's good to see you again.
Hello. Thank you for keeping it going while I was traveling, even though I know I am the crux of this operation. I'm glad you guys kept the roof on while I was out trouncing around Europe. Yes. No, I'm obviously kidding. I am a bonus feature at best.
You're literally the last word. Like you
close it out.
You're structural, man.
Okay. Side note. I have one of my favorite content creators is a guy by the name of Jose Monkey, and he's kind of an OSINT creator. Have you guys watched any of his videos? He does the short forms. Yeah, he does the short form stuff on all the short form platforms, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, and he does OSINT things where people send him videos and then he has to find where they are, right? Hey, I'm just here in like some nondescript place. Find me, Jose Monkey. And then he finds them and he explains how he does it and uses like OSINT type stuff and OpenStreetMap. And anyway, right now, the reason I'm bringing it up is right now he's doing Canadian Week. And so I have been thinking about you gents and a fair bit of our audience as well. I've also noticed a fair bit of uptick since we've been doing this again of newsletter subscribers with Canadian email addresses. So
that's awesome.
Keep that advertising alive.
The militant wing of the Girl Guide has found my newsletter or whatever it is. So, okay, cool. Oh. So to the news. Unless
gotta make a T-shirt of that.
Yes, the Girl. Yeah, that's our swag. The militant wing of the Girl Guide. Okay, to the news. So this has been an interesting one. So apparently, back in 2017, Putin decreed or passed a bill, as they like to say. I don't know how much passing of bill. Does Schoolhouse Rock? Does that work in Russia? I'm not sure.
Doesn't work in America either.
Yeah. Okay, I'll get to that. So in 2017, Putin made a bunch of online encryption tools illegal, including VPNs and encrypted communications. This did not become even attempted to be enforced until about 2019, when the GRU and some other organizations under Putin started sending mean letters and nasty grams to VPN providers, and they were like whack-a-moling VPN nodes that were actually physically within their borders that they could control, but still their citizens were obviously, if they wanted to use a VPN, they still could use a VPN or Tor or any of the other services. Well, now this week, on kind of the next level of trying to actually enforce this was, instead of the nasty grams going to the VPN providers, the nasty grams went to Apple, and Apple caved basically and took a dozens of these VPN apps out of the App Store in Russia. So yeah, that's like obviously a much bigger and more effective blow to this enforcement, right? I talked about this on social media this week, and one of the more interesting themes that I saw coming in my comment sections was, hey, if we don't see our VPN on this list, should we be a little bit worried about how effective this VPN actually is? Because if it was effective, it probably would have gotten this whack-a-mole treatment in Russia, and I thought that was an interesting theme. What's your take on this, guys?
I right out of the gate, I'm actually a little bit curious about why they were still operating in Russia in light of all of the sanctions and everything as a direct offshoot of the war in Ukraine. So I'm a little bit actually caught off guard by that particular aspect of things. Um, and I'm less worried about the viability of VPNs, because this is, I mean, I get it. I understand why they would do this. Um, but yeah, no, Jamie.
Well, so to answer your first question, I'm not sure these are all like U.S. or even EU based companies, right? A lot of
Mm,
the a lot of the VPNs, like Proton comes to mind. Like a feature of Proton is that they are housed in, what is it, Switzerland, and
Switzerland, yeah.
and so that they can be like not sanctioned, like that the three-letter agencies can't send them a letter to go do something. That's like a perk of Proton VPN, right?
I don't know. There's a certain amount of, we'll call it, justifiable skepticism that says VPN as a way to alter my apparent geographic location is interesting. Purchasing VPN service as a way to secure my connection, much less interesting. And
Yeah.
so what it feels like is less so that it's about securing access or making it so that the GRU can see all of my traffic, and much more about geolocation evasion and the reverse pipeline. It's not so much Russian citizens evading the lockouts on them from a sanctions perspective, but rather Russian citizens gaining access to things that don't go through the big GRU firewall. And
Yep.
if you think there's no big GRU firewall, you're wrong.
Oh,
Yeah.
categorically.
So 100%. I get this question a lot as like a public infosec figure to some degree of like, oh, well, what VPN do you use? You must use a VPN. That's like all of the commercials I see on YouTube. And it's like, oh no, they don't do very much for your security. And like most security people do not subscribe to this, right? There obviously is use cases for a VPN. It just has very little to do with like your personal security on like
So,
Wi-Fi or something.
sometimes it's convenient for me to access a otherwise non-routable, non-accessible device at home. And so I do have a VPN endpoint inside of my home network that I'll VPN to when I need to apparently be at home. But day-to-day operations at work, honestly, we use a lot of IPsec meshing for doing cluster communications across providers. Like, there's a bunch of reasons to use IPsec meshing as, I mean, technically it's a VPN, but it's more like an overlay network over existing SDNs. compared to using it as a security feature. Like all of the users, they're just on laptops on the internet. I mean, our offices are basically just exclusive access coffee shops. There's no office from a traditional networking standpoint there. The only place where we actually functionally use them is, oddly, to deal with the United States. A lot of state and local governments in the United States, taxation offices, their web interfaces are only available geographically there. So even though our company's headquartered in Europe and we have to pay taxes in Austin, local city taxes in Austin, you can't access that local city interface from outside of the United States. And so VPN to the rescue.
Yeah, in a similar vein, I do the same thing when I travel, is that when I'm in Europe, I use VPN just so I can read news in North America, because so many sites will block it because they don't want to have to deal with GDPR and things like that. So they just, rather than actually do something sensible, they just go, we're going to block you, which is so freaking irritating.
So to bring this back really quick from like the VPN is not actually a security tool, because I agree, right? Even for person, not even, like we're talking corporate, but even like personal, like a lot of like non-infosec people, that's one of their only things that they really like see like advertisements are, that like kind of advertise as a security service that they might actually like, that they might actually go and purchase. So if you're one of those people and you're listening, just like FYI, that's not actually buying you all that much. That like HTTPS didn't solve like many years ago. There are certain threat models where like Proton makes sense if like you would rather Proton have your traffic versus your ISP because of whoever you are as a person. But like for the general pop, like this is where it's at. Anyway, to bring it back to this story, yes, Russia used the excuse that these Tor and these VPN services were being used by cyber criminals to do cyber criminal things and like send bomb threats and things like that. And so while yes, I agree, I think the real reason is absolutely they do not want their citizens reading the stuff that they don't want their citizens reading. Because like I think there's only a handful of reasons why any government is attacking any encryption service, right? And it has very little to do with we want to catch more bad guys, right? When bad guys are live streaming, you know, their shootings, or they're posting their plans on Facebook of whatever they're going to do, and we don't catch them. What makes you think if they read every encrypted text message, all of a sudden they're going to catch them? It's not going to happen, right? So there's this guy, and so I did want to bring it back, because instead of just Russia bad, there is a lot of this going on in Canada and the US as well, in terms of the government attacking encrypted services under the guise of we need to break this encryption to better secure our children or whatever it is.
Trust us, we're from the government.
And the UK and Europe and
yes.
Australia and New Zealand and all of the air quotes Western democracies. Everybody's doing the same thing.
Any country with an internet connection. Let's just cut right to the chase.
Yep. And so I'll link another. I didn't get to put it in the show notes yet. I will. There's another article from last year that I covered in depth, and I don't think it got nearly enough coverage, about a bunch of dark money, like tracing a bunch of dark money, like donations to. This is U.S. based specifically, to attacking Apple and iCloud encryption under the guise of we need to find and protect like child exploitation material on this platform. So we need to break all encryption for that, right? To like use this emotionally charged, like save the children reason to actually kind of come in and weaken encryption on, one of the biggest operating systems on the planet. So
there were protests in Canada a couple of years ago, and the funding that the protesters were receiving, the vast majority of it came from people outside of Canada. It was actually influence operators from other countries. So it was really amazing to see that sort of thing. And again, flipping back to the Russia thing, the other piece of that too is quite literally so they can exercise their level of control, so they can control their narrative. So if people can access VPN, get news from other sources, they're going to start questioning the narrative, and that would be a problem for the government.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other interesting part here that's like buried in the story is Tor specifically, right? Because that's obviously also takes a certain level of sophistication user to achieve, and so like you're targeting a very specific subset of your population that would use Tor to do things that you don't want them to do, or information that you don't want them to get, right, and disseminate. So anyway, found this one interesting. Thanks for
Do you, do you
your
mean do you mean the dark web?
the dark web.
And here we are, the dark web. Why do you guys crave the dark web so much? Because the dark web is exclusive.
Just checking. If you really do want to be a nation state and review everybody's text messages, you're probably going to want an AI to help you out. But I'd suggest it not be OpenAI and ChatGPT, because they do things like forget to mention out loud that they've had a breach for a non-trivial period of time. And when you've got TechCrunch warning you that AI companies are treasure troves for hackers, that's a thing, right? The one that's even more, I mean, we can beat up on Gen AI all day long if we feel like it, but the other one that's hilarious is the Mac app for ChatGPT was just going ahead and storing conversations as plain text.
It's a feature.
Because why do anything other than that? That makes total sense. The whole Gen AI world is I don't think that it's going to ultimately good places. I don't know that it's quite the set of waste items that everybody says it is, but I also don't know that it's necessarily going to end up working out terribly well for everyone.
I think we're really in the gold rush stage, quite literally, and everybody is rushing to be, I want to be part of this, and the stupid will happen. So that's going to be, I ultimately am optimistic that we're going to get to a good place, because so much of this technology, there is positive implications, but with a hammer, you can build you a house, or I can beat you about the head and neck. So, I mean, obviously it's how the tool gets used.
I mean, looking forward to some of the stuff that's going to start dropping this fall with the next round of updates from Apple. I've been messing around with local LLM usage, so running Olama with Llama 3 or Gemma 2, and you know what? It's 90% of the way there. It answered some pretty complex questions. Jackie's a school teacher, and she was asking it questions about Ontario's curriculum, and it was answering correctly out of a 4.7 gigabyte data file running locally on a MacBook, like M1 Air. So there's a lot of good you can get without necessarily being embedded in a real running live cloud-based service as well. And I don't know that people are looking at that closely enough.
I agreed with you. I'm actually using one called Private LLM, and again, it runs locally, and actually it's really, really, really good. You can use whichever instruction set you want in order to run those, and it's been a fantastic thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's generating you right now, so
well, something has to.
Beep boop. I completely agree. Huge proponent of local stuff. I also like a project by Daniel Miessler called Fabric that can tie together a bunch of the different API stuff, and then you use it locally. You are using the cloud services there, but it's a really powerful open source tool to build in a lot of the context stuff and do a lot of the prompt engineering and kind of build your own RAG and things like this. Turning into a bit of a power user of that tool, definitely go check it out. He's got some really good YouTube videos getting you set up and started on that. I just overall, I'm very bullish on AI. I'm not the naysayer, right? But I'm also not the extreme, hey, this is going to save us or kill us either. I just think this is going to be a really cool tool for us. And it's obviously already changed the world in various ways. But I do just want to make a plea to the security people listening to this to not be the department of no when it comes to this, when your teams are trying to explore AI technology. I've been seeing this, right, where these security purists are coming in and saying no, you cannot use this. This is and pointing at stories like this one that we just covered and saying, this is dangerous. You're putting all this stuff in this third-party tool, and this is the worst security thing you could possibly do. And I just disagree, right? The risk can be handled here.
Yeah, I mean, that's not the reason that I say no. The predominant reason that I say no is because every vendor wants to embed AI in their product, and their upsell charge for AI in their product is basically the same as getting access to the underlying general AI yourself. So, I can give you a ChatGPT license and a AI strict version of the tool, or I can give you the AI enabled version of the tool, but only one of the 10 tools that you use, because I don't want to pay 10x the cost of a ChatGPT seat. Like there's a bunch of funding model stuff in there as well to pay attention to.
Completely agree on like, hey, do your due diligence on like people sneaking this stuff under the hood, and it's like really just an OpenAI API key with a margin on top that they're taking, right? But I just have seen enough people telling their developers that they can't use ChatGPT, and I'm like, that's a very quick way to get your developers to stop even asking you. Or telling you what they're doing, right? Because this is currently the most popular tool on the planet, right?
Completely agree. And then all of a sudden, everybody has shadow IT. Oh, wait, they already do. That's a real problem. And the thing is, the Department of No is not something new. This is something that we've dealt with forever. I mean, Jamie and I used to have to deal with one guy in particular who will remain nameless that was just absolutely, the whole point of his existence was to get people fired. But thankfully, he was really bad at his job. And this is that real frustration that, yes, these are tools that will be good in some cases, but obviously there's going to be outliers. Like Grammarly is very helpful as an example, but it requires access to everything, including your children. It's absolutely insane the amount of access that particular platform has. But you got to counterbalance it. What's the risk? Are you doing it as a personal thing, or are you doing it as a corporate thing? You have to do the risk assessment. But just arbitrarily saying no is absolutely nonsensical. And going back to talking about tools that are AI powered and such, there's a great one that I got to call out, and specifically that I use, called Clef Notes. And what this one does is, like, you can talk for about 10 minutes, and then it'll actually transcribe everything you said, and you can say, I want it as meeting notes, or I want it as a shopping list, or whatever it happens to be, and it will put it into that format, and it's just absolutely fantastic. So it's just one of the examples of a really good tool that will run locally on your system that was able to do all of these things and not have to rely on everything being shipped off to wherever, Stan.
Indeed. But speaking of just hacking your way around fundamental problems in your day-to-day life, I'm done paying for concerts, man. If only there was anything I could do about that.
Hello, Cleveland. Yeah, no, it's a real problem there. And you got to really think, how can you do this?
Into your story.
I'm working with the segue here, Hoss. Jeez.
Okay.
God, it was almost good. No, it was never good. Yeah, so hackers have figured out a way to mess with the barcodes and reverse engineer them for Ticketmaster's barcode system. This could be a huge problem for Ticketmaster, because all of a sudden you have 4 people showing up for the same seat. That could get super interesting. And this news is coming on the heels of a recently disclosed data breach. They're having and they had actually another data breach a few days before that. They're having a bad 2024 right now. And this is not to beat up on them. I know people like to go after them for their cost, and it is expensive. But these are the kind of things where you vote with your dollars. You do what's right for you. Me, I tend to go to a lot of events, so I tend to use them rather extensively. Oddly enough, I have not received my notice that I was part of the
I've
compromised
had 2.
data. You got 2. Oh, you got you got mine then. You got one for you, one for me.
No, it's that I've got one for my regular Ticketmaster account, and then I've got one for the Ticketmaster account that's associated with a sports team.
Ah, very good, very good. Yes, I'm very curious as to where mine is. And by some miracle, my account is just so old that they actually didn't get to it when they did the data breach.
Dave, you can't vote with your dollars in a monopoly. Sorry.
Well, you can. It's just going to be a very quiet party all by yourself. Download the album, sit in a dark room, listen to it. Go like this with an iPhone, because people don't do lighters anymore, and you get the effect.
Apple Vision Pro is actually pretty good.
You just became such a moment in Letterkenny all by yourself. We've often spoken about ransomware or malware people and their impact on things like hospitals. And we've always got that great positive story about how they attacked Toronto sick kids and backed off. There's other stories about how they attack other hospitals and don't back off. This is a story I caught in the Reg, and it's one of those ones that really makes you stop for a hot second. It's a story of a single human, Johanna Gruthusen, who found out with only a few hours notice that she wasn't going to have the surgery that she expected she would have, but instead was going to have a much more impactful surgery. She was going from a skin sparing mastectomy to a complete simple mastectomy last minute. So thought that things were going to be okay, but took this massive impact. And the reason for it, interestingly, was not entirely the hospital, but rather one of the providers to the hospital. And I've been in conversations lately with a bunch of people, kind of as we've talked through things like the City of Hamilton forever breach, that talk about getting the basics right, and things like 3-2-1 backups, and things like understanding how to properly contain and purge your systems, having cyber insurance in place, having responders in place. And when it turns into stories about individual humans and mother of 2 young kids, and it's not right. And either we as a society need to step up and fund those organizations so that they can defend themselves, or we need to help those organizations understand that if they don't do the basics, then they sacrifice their ability to run as an organization, and we just pull them apart. And I don't have any better answer for any of it, but just this kind of story and the kind of human scale impact. When we talk about ransomware things, and we're kind of blasé about it because they happen all the time. They happen all the time, and it's not good.
I agree with that. And one of the things that I'm fortunate to be a part of is a body called Sightline Security. And what it does is it provides security services for nonprofits that are not able to, have security people on staff for themselves. So this is just one example, and there are lots of examples out there where there are people doing good things to try and help better secure organizations. We need to see more of that, not less, because exactly that. Like, this is a great example of bad things can happen, and we want to make sure that we're moving the ball forward. So, if you are talking to anybody out there or curious about it, look up Sightline Security and see more information there. As one example, there are other parties out there as well, and I just wholeheartedly support anybody that is doing good stuff.
All right. With that, let's move on to cyber. The Canadian government has actually done something pretty cool.
I'm sorry, say that again.
It literally pains me to say that out loud. And even worse, the CRTC has done something cool.
Oh, now you're lying.
Yeah, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, the regulator of telco in Canada, has actually done something pretty cool. They've published a report that was put together following up on the Rogers network outage about 2 years ago now, almost exactly, summer of July 2022. One of the major telcos in Canada is called Rogers Communications. Hand wave all kinds of conversations about how horrible they are. But suffice to say, due to some single sourcing contracts that happened in the financial services sector, the major interbanking capability in Canada was offline. So your ability to walk into a store and use your debit card, walk into a store and use your credit card to purchase something was offline as a result of this particular outage. And it's only a couple screens long, but it goes into some pretty harsh detail on what went wrong and how to not do that. It's actually pretty well written. You should probably read it.
It also has a very good 1999 PowerPoint network diagram.
Oh, it's beautiful. It has 5 different colored clouds on it. 5.
I thought it was the cloud. I didn't know there were 5 clouds.
There's so many clouds, man. Look up in the sky. What are you talking about?
There's clouds, there's router icons, there's dashed lines and straight lines. It's fantastic. But anyways, if any part of your world involves being dependent on a telco, it's worth a read.
Yeah, I had a glance at that one the other day, and yeah, it is definitely worth a read. I agree with you there.
Do you know what else you shouldn't do?
Oh, what?
Lie about how many people were involved in a data breach.
Oh, data breach. I thought it was something else. Yes, that is super, super bad. Me blinks at OpenAI.
Yeah. No, in this case, it's Prudential Insurance. They had a data breach back in February because, I mean, who can keep track of these things, really? They said about 36,000 people were affected, and they just revised that upward to 2.5 million.
Sorry, what now? You say that number
36,000,
again.
2.5 million actually affected.
That's a bit of a difference.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's only a small percentage of their customers. They boast about 50 million customers. So, 2.5 million is not a lot out of 50 million, but it's a lot more than zero. And
How do we
also,
find out? I can tell you how we found out. I didn't even read the article. Hold on. I have a guess. Can I tell you? Can you ask me if my guess is right?
sure. What is your guess, sir?
Is it the state of Maine? Is that how we found out?
Yes.
Nothing but net.
Thank you, Maine. For all of you who don't know, Maine, who has like less people than the county in New York I grew up in as a state, and it's a fairly large state, has a law on the books that if any one resident of the state of Maine is part of a data breach, that the entire data breach needs to be disclosed. Most of the data breaches that we hear about nowadays are because of this one law in the books in Maine. I knew it. I knew it.
I'm loving Maine right now.
Damn them lobstermen.
This is one of those things that aggravates the hell out of me because this is just one of many examples, but it's never like data breaches happen. It's an accepted thing. I mean, I hope it doesn't happen to organizations, but it's not the fact that there's a breach. It's that when the people try to cover it up or hide it, and then it ends up in, SEC filings or whatever it happens to be, or in the state of Maine. It's just like, it's not the crime. It's the cover up. It gets them every time.
These kids today. We got another mailbag entry this week. Anybody want to hear it?
Let's
Yeah.
go.
Dear
Here's
Liquid
the
Matrices, what's the deal with the cloud? I really like hugging my servers and I give them special names. How do you hug a cloud? Even better, how do I secure it? Thanks, all y'all. Love, Legacy Folk.
Oh, Matt,
Matt,
you want this one?
you name your cloud servers.
I do. I used to name them after Dragon Ball Z characters. Then I went in through a Lord of the Rings phase. But yes, of course, I name my cloud servers. Okay, what's the real question here? How do you hug a cloud? How do you secure a cloud? First of all, I have a great answer to this question that is short enough to say in a podcast episode. Have you guys heard of Rich Mogul?
No, I'm aware.
So Rich Mogul, good friend of all of ours, they're being idiots, who runs a blog called Securosis. They used to also be an analyst firm, right? Rich has gone on to like
May or may not have contributed to that, and or am still a contributing analyst.
I was going to say, I think you both have Securosis email addresses. I somehow have not been invited to that party. I am in the Slack though. Anyway, Rich, who teaches the cloud security incident response course at Black Hat Training, right, for thousands of dollars.
Except not this year, but yes.
I know, but he combined it with another one. He's still teaching cloud security at Black Hat, and it's a world-class training. It's not cheap, right? Black Hat charges whatever they charge. For free now, Rich has a newsletter that I helped him set up on the same platform I do my newsletter on, called Cloud Slaw, like coleslaw. And SLAW stands for Security Lab a Week. And so every week in this newsletter, he puts out a lab that might as well be in his Black Hat training. They're that good. And also, he's got it so over-engineered so that if you sign up today for the newsletter, he puts you into an automation so you get the labs in order. So you don't get them like released every week like a normal newsletter. So he's got some crazy automations going on. Anyway, I'm an avid reader. Really like what he's doing. It's like absolutely world-class training for free. So everyone should take advantage of that.
100%.
I may or may not recognize some of the tutorial entries in Cloud Slaw as being things that Rich and I developed while standing on that stage at Black Hat over the last decade doing that work. So yes, very familiar. And
Also,
yes,
I can also give another somewhat serious answer. I think there are two paths in cloud security. Well, there's probably more, but there's like two paths that I see that are like the big rocks of if you want to get into cloud security, you can kind of go in these directions. If you do both, you're crazy. But one is like the actual servers that are running in the cloud. So getting really good at orchestration and Terraform, infrastructure as code, Kubernetes stuff, Docker stuff, very specific to cloud, like server running infrastructure, ops, security ops. So learning all of the, like, pick your cloud of choice. If it's AWS, like a lot of people, or if it's Google, what's their like audit trail look like? What's the observability on this platform look like? You know, how do I find and fix vulnerabilities through infrastructure as code? How do I build guardrails? All that kind of stuff, right? And then there's a whole nother world in cloud security. And these people, I bow to them because otherwise I would be them. And I'm glad I don't have to be them. And that's called identity and access management. And it's a completely different beast. And you need to basically go get a PhD in the 5,000 plus roles that you could give somebody in AWS to let them do what they need to do on the platform. And anyway, that's a whole nother thing. I'm not even kidding, right? It's really, really hard to be good at both of these things. Never the two shall meet. But if you're really into identity governance and all this kind of stuff, cloud identity is a rabbit hole you will never find the bottom of. How is that?
Nailed it.
not wrong.
How is that, Mailbag?
Not wrong. We are on the verge of running long, and thusly it is time for some brieflies. My briefly, I just give you the link to Olama. Run your LLMs locally. You will be astonished at how awesome it can be for you. Matt?
Mine is the continued Microsoft drama of the breach that they had a few months ago from Midnight Blizzard. Apparently, some notifications went out this week to the admin tenant email address for the O365 admin, which in their docs they tell you to like never give a human actually access to that, so that like the notification of the breach is sitting in an email box that no one's ever supposed to log into. So anyway, there's some drama in the thread, and you can go read about it. But Microsoft again, not doing great on this particular breach.
That's awesome. Dave?
My briefly is absolutely shocking news. Apparently, 8 nations are warning that China-based hackers have been accessing government networks. Who'da thunk it? APT 40 is underway, and please be vigilant. Please be checking your systems. Yeah, bad things fire bad, all that sort of fun stuff.
That tracks. Upcoming appearances.
Well, for me, I was on Global News yesterday, and we got to talk about the Ticketmaster breach, so that was fun. You can check that out. I posted that on LinkedIn, and I'm sure it'll show up in the show notes. It's because I can't configure that properly, and I'll be at summer camp. Matt?
I will be hosting an event called SNUSEC in New York City next week. I think registration still might be open for a few more days by the time this comes out. But for all my New York City friends, I'll be farting around, running a little mini security meetup / we have like a few talks lined up, but it's mostly for the meetup. And then I will be in Vegas. It seems like I'm going to be there Sunday to Sunday. So I'm there for the whole shebang this year.
Longer than me for the first time.
Yeah, I have commitments Monday morning and I have commitments Saturday night. So I am traveling Sunday to Sunday.
Ah, bless your heart.
That's awful. I'm going to be at the other end of a Starlink connection and not admitting my GPS coordinates to anyone.
Nice.
Because
I
that
love it.
seems like the right thing to do.
I love it. Cool. Well, thanks.
Pay some bills.
Yep.
Do we want the advertiser to speak of their advertising?
I
Me?
think we do.
Oh yeah, I guess it's an upcoming appearance too in your inbox every week if you sign up. My upcoming appearance on Friday mornings. Yes, I run a newsletter called Vulnerable You. Thank you for all of you who have been signing up through the show notes. I see you. I appreciate you. And yeah, I do. I started doing this cybersecurity news thing on Liquidmatrix in like 2008. I am still doing it. I just do it for myself also over on Vulnerable You. So I appreciate all of you who sign up.
Very cool.
Awesome. That does get us to the end. And since you usually have the last word, Matt, would you please read from the screen?
I'm Europe now. Very fine. Not worry about my doing well.
Very nice.
Bye, everybody.
Catch you all next
See you
time.
in a week.